What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke with our round 2 prop and betting stream for the BMW Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure tomorrow. With a look at the averages from round number 1, we'll talk weather as well, and to look at the underdog and the prize fix boards to try and find some value for Friday. But today ended up being a really good one for yours truly. Our course rate ended up playing a lot harder than 2021. Ended up being very profitable from the prop betting side of things. So hopefully you guys were able to tail that exposure, take advantage yourselves, and to even add on top of it for any of your own props. It was a pretty easy one to profit when it played a whole 2 strokes harder than a lot of other people thought. And not to victory lap it too much, but the people that said it was going to play the same, that thought it was going to play harder, look like slapdicks right now, right? And I gotta say, tried to tell you guys on that live stream that that was the case. And if you took my word, well, it paid off rather nicely. So let's try and add on top of it. That's what we're going to focus on here in this live stream, is trying to find an edge for Friday. And I think I have an idea how we're going to attack this slate. I was looking at some of the early boards. We got a prize fix board about 10 minutes before I went live here. So going to go through all that action. But any questions that you've got, any sort of bet deep dives that you want to go through, we're going to do those a little bit later on. But yeah, let's have ourselves a day, and happy Thursday to everyone out there. We have Maui in the chat there a little early. Also, Jay Hooves as well. It says, smash that like John, you slapdicks. Love the Philly accent. And yeah, so hit smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Also appreciate the shout out there, Golf Kid. He said my course read was spot on and it made you a bunch of money. There you go. And yeah, the Patreon slip smacked. We went 7-1 on our props for round 1. So not quite the A-no sweep to say that we went undefeated, but we were pretty damn close to it. Glad to hear that you had some good exposure yourself. Daniel said it looked like 2 different courses. Yeah, that's actually going to kind of lead into our read for round 2. I do think it's going to play easier for tomorrow. He said you're shocked by McIntyre. You had Hideki beating them straight up. Guess you didn't watch my content, Ryan. I was really high on McIntyre this week. I bet him outright, in fact. I get it. I know the form fell off a little bit, but Robbie Mack played like an elite tier player for most of 2025. So not really that surprised myself, but hate to hear that you lost to that, right? Regardless of what player it was on, hopefully you have a slightly better day the next day. We have Leonard there. He says, Luke has been the best all year. I appreciate that, my man. And yeah, we're going to talk through these props. He said you're scared we're going to see 72.5 lines now. Not quite, man. They already have the odds up on a lot of these sports books, and they're a lot more tame than that. And yeah, man, Bobby Back T1, that's somebody that watches my content. So good stuff, my dude. And it'd be nice if you could hold on over the next few days. But let's hop on into this thing. So we've got the averages on the board, and these are for the entire day. But kind of like Daniel mentioned, it played a lot easier after delay. So the first half of tee times played to about a +1 scoring average. The second half only played to about +0.4. And towards about the last half an hour to hour of play, it went from like a 0.8 scoring average to a +0.4 scoring average. So it got easy in a hurry. That was after a lot of the winds got out of there. And they do have a sub-air system. So it is worth noting that they're probably going to try and suck some of that moisture out of the golf course. But I'm not sure if they're going to be able to suck a whole half an inch of rain out of the course overnight. So I think some of the early starters tomorrow morning could play to a slightly easier scoring average on top of some pin locations that don't look as difficult either. So we're going to go through those hole by hole, show you why I don't think they're as drastic as round number 1. But overall, I've got it at about a half a stroke over par scoring average. So about 0.2 strokes easier than round number 1. Birdie averaged at least probably like 3.3 per round. Bogey average perhaps going down a little bit as well, maybe to like 3.4 per round. Nothing too crazy in any one category, but slightly easier than what you had for Thursday. So I'll show you guys the pin locations and also the weather here in a second. But the weather looks almost the exact same as what we had for Thursday. Now, a little softer after that little bit of rain that they got. And the winds look the exact same as well. So the fairway average, the green average, I also think are going to get a little bit easier. But let's show you exactly why that's the case. So here's the weather forecast for Caves Valley. You can see the winds are pretty much non-existent, a little bit of a breath of wind that comes in around 2 to 3 p.m., but nothing really that looks that consequential for these players. Sub 10 miles an hour wind, sub 15 miles an hour wind gusts pretty much the entire day. And these pin locations, though, are what I want to go through. So for hole number 1, it's on this like back right corner, which looks like a harder pin location, but it's actually easier than today. Like I said on yesterday's live stream, if you guys caught it, this entire green slopes from front to back. So these back pin locations are actually the ones that are going to play a little bit easier. Next up, we have hole 2, which is a front left pin location. This is a long par 4. So the fact that it's on that front side does help out the players a little bit. And it's also, I would say, a slightly easier chip shot. So that'll be marginally easier than round 1. Next up, we have 3, which was moved up with the tee box today. So I think there's a chance that they tip it out back there, but we'll have to see what they decide to do. Pin location wise, I would say it's a little trickier than today as well. So this is one of the few holes on property that I think the scoring average is very likely going to get a little bit harder on, but there's not that many of those, as you'll see as we go through these. Next up, we have 4, which is on the middle right side. It's about the same difficulty as today. In fact, because it's on a low area of the green, maybe you would say that it would be a little bit easier to access. So I would say about the same, maybe ever so slightly easier in round 2. Next up, we have 5, which is a middle pin location. This is easier than today, which is in that back corner. Not only was it tucked further, it was a longer shot in, closer to the hazard over the back, but it was also on a down slope, as you can see over there. Now it's in the middle of the green, which is the largest portion, and you even have a little bit of side slope to the right that can help you. So that's a significantly easier pin location, probably the biggest difference out of any one that we've seen so far. Next up, we have 6, which is towards the middle side of the screen. I would say that this one is hard to read. I'm not really sure if this one's going to play easier or harder. And here's why, because you do have a backstop helping you, which if you hit a perfect shot, is going to make the ball get pretty close to that hole. But you also have a slope in front of this pin location. And there are times like 12 at Sedgefield. If you guys remember that hole, that's the par 3 that has a similar shape. Now, it's not as long as this green. It's more like wide at Sedgefield, but it still has that same kind of tiering with the slopes on it, where there's that little middle slope and the 2 slopes in between. That whole location on one of the 2 days this year played really hard. And then on one of the 2 days, it played really easy. So I think it really comes down to the wind and how precise these players can be, because if there's no wind and, soft conditions and they hit the perfect shot, they're going to have like 5 feet for birdie. But if you don't hit the perfect shot and you have to contend with these slopes, either to putt and try and get down in 2 or with a chip shot around the green, it's a really, really difficult task. So I would say that hole 6 is probably going to play to about the same scoring average, but I would imagine that there'd be more birdies at this hole because of that backstop, but also more bogeys, because if you miss, it's a less straightforward up and down, I would say. Let's go to 7 next. So 7 is a middle left pin location, and let's not click the ad like an absolute slapdick, but it's a middle left pin location about where my cursor is now, which I would say is about the same difficulty as today. A lot of people would probably think it's easier because it's a shorter shot in, but the reality is that it's closer towards the bunker as well. So that probably takes away some of that. The up and down would be a little trickier if you hit it in that bunker. Next up, we have 8, which is on the front right. This is an easier pin location. Tough long par 4, so it's nice to have that front pin, because the miss on a long par 4 is normally towards the front side of that green, which means, back pin locations are a lot harder to get up and down to, like what you had for today. Whereas if you miss towards the front right over here and it's this front pin location, it's not quite as difficult to get that up and down. So, some of the pins have been easier for birdie so far. That's one where I think we're going to see slightly less bogeys. Hole 9 is a little trickier than today, I would say. It is in this back left corner, but rather than being tucked just over this bunker, now it's a much more wide open shot. So it's I would say a mid iron in, maybe like an 8-7 iron for players for most into this hole. So I would say the scoring average would probably stay about the same as what it was for today. But if it was going to go in any direction, maybe slightly more difficult than what you had for round number 1. Next up, we have 10, which is in the back right corner. This is one that looks a lot harder on paper, but it's really not going to be. Today's pin location was on the high spot of the screen. Everything slopes from the left to the right side. So as you can see with McIntyre, he even had a hard time getting it close there because everything was spinning down here towards the right side. And though it is a slightly longer shot in that, adds a little bit of difficulty, everything is sloping towards this pin location. So for example, if you hit it a little left to here, it's going to slope a little bit towards the right and probably end up 5 to 10 feet. You hit it a little bit long, you have that little back stop. That's going to help you hit it close as well. I actually think the scoring average here is going to get significantly easier. Next up, we have 11, which is in the middle back. I would say that this one's going to be a lot harder than today. So today it was in this low spot, but a lot of players were afraid of spinning it off and into the water. So I would say McIntyre here was probably McIntyre was probably the most aggressive of a lot of the players that I saw, taking it and spinning it back to the pin location. But tomorrow it's up on this little high spot. And because of how soft the greens are going to be, this slope in front of the pin is going to gobble up balls. And I would say that there's a chance that if players hit a full spin shot into here, that it could spin off this ledge, off this little backstop, and off into the lake in front. So I think that this is a hole to watch out for. They might even move up the tee box because this pin location that they have it on, this is the only reason I say it, is borderline unfair. I mean, you have a slope just a couple paces to the right going to the right. You miss it like 3 or 4 paces to the left, and you have that slope there. And you, of course, have the one short, which I've already mentioned. I think if you hit a full spin shot, could go back into the lake. It makes me think there's a chance they move up the tee box here because it did only play 300 yards. It's also slightly downhill. So if they move it up, and let's see what the tee box situation looks like. And yeah, they're all in close proximity here, right? So if they only have to move this up 1 tee box tomorrow, if they move it up right here and you see it on the shot tracker, players are going to go for this green because this pin location is so brutally hard with a wedge that if they give players even a remote chance of going for it, anyone that can clear this water, and I think it's like a 290-yard carry, and it's downwind, or I should say downhill, not downwind. Not sure about the wind direction. A lot of players are going to take that on, in my opinion. So that's one to keep an eye on. I know a lot of people were talking about hole 5 as potentially drivable, so I guess let's go back to that one as well and maybe give it some extra thought. This is such an easy pin at 5 that I don't think they're going to move it up. Like on the converse of that hole, like that's by far, in my opinion, the hardest spot that you could put a pin at 12 or 11, whatever we were just at. This one here, I would say is the easiest pin that you get at this hole. Maybe this far left pin would be slightly easier because of that side slope, but yeah, I would say there's a better chance that they move back. I think it was 11 that we were on, I should say. Next up, we're at 12. So this is the long par 4. This used to be a par 5 in 2021. It is going to be in the front middle here, which for a long par 4 looks easier on paper, but we've always got to remember the front pin locations on longer iron shots is not always the easiest, and it does bring the water into play and this bunker, so don't sleep on that one. It's still going to be a very difficult hole. You also have 13, which is towards the middle right side. I would say that this one's easier than today. It's further away from the water, right? That's the main difference there, and it's a really large green complex. So with the soft greens, I think it'll play pretty easy, actually. Next up, we have 14, which is the front right corner. It's looks easier than today, but let's get this to load. It looks like it's freezing on me, but when we get it here in a second, we can load in that front right side. Looks like just that tab might be locked out. So let's see. Maybe I can refresh it. Maybe we can get it to work here. The front right pin location, though, just to go to 14, we can look at it over here. It's a shorter shot in and was only the easier holes that you had on that back 9, I believe. It looks like Torcast doesn't want to cooperate with us, but that's going to be an easier pin location. 15's also a very easy pin location. It's probably the most accessible that you have on that green. 16's in the back middle. That's the par 5. You're going to see eagles at that hole. I think it's significantly easier than today. 17's also easier. 17 was closer towards the water on the right side, and it played tipped out at 240. And then finally, 18's also easier. And this is what I mean, especially like the back 9, which was brutal today, is not going to be as brutal for tomorrow. 18 was in the very back left, and now it's on the front left, and that's a long par 4. Once again, your misses on long par 4s are normally towards the front side, so getting up and down on those holes is going to be a lot easier. 17, you're not going to see as many of those water balls. 16, potentially even eagle looks because it's easier to hit it close. There's just a lot of changes that are going to be positive, and it'd be nice to get this Torcast to load so I can show you guys some of those holes. But yeah, here's 14, which I think it's because of McIntyre had some weird thing going on with his shot tracker here, so we probably have to go to a different player to get that to work. But I think you guys get the idea with these pins. I think they look a little softer than what they were for today, which is part of the reason I think the scoring average is going to get easier. But then I think that might even be too conservative, having it at like a half a stroke over par, because we also have the softer conditions. Like they got that rain, it played easier this afternoon, even with those harder pin locations. So I'm going to conservatively say like half a stroke over par, especially with the sub-air systems. Like maybe they dry it out more than we're giving it credit for, but there's a chance that it plays even to even under par, especially in the morning wave for tomorrow. So that's why I think there could be some positive stance value on a lot of these pick'em slates. And Underdog didn't have the biggest selection up. Prize Picks did have a lot more that we're going to have to go through, but that's kind of what I'm leaning on right now, at least from the condition standpoint in attacking these pick'em boards and these different categories. Feels like some positive stance plays on, mispriced props is probably the best way to go about it. So we're going to go through Underdog Prize Picks. I'll give you guys an idea of a few leans that stand out. First off, though, I do want to go through one 2-ball matchup that I wanted to throw out there, just because I already know what I want to bet on this angle, and we'll just knock it off real quickly before really deep diving over on the pick'em side of things. It's going to be Harry Hall versus Jason Day, and they don't have a board up on Hard Rock Bet yet. That is the sports book that I have access to, but assuming that I'm getting at least this minus 120, if not slightly better odds, I mean, hopefully, right, we can get a little bit of a better number than this here. But I think Harry Hall should be the significant favorite between him and Jason Day. And if we take a look at the matchup tool and bet the number, that's what we're going to do this comparison. Let me actually just bring that up right now. Let's compare those two over the last 24 rounds. So let's throw in Harry Hall first. He's going to be the player that we're looking to take on this matchup, and then we'll match him up against Jason Day. And we're using the last 24 rounds. We're not looking at the round one stats because it's only 18 holes. It really doesn't mean that much. But over the last 24 rounds, this is a pretty, sizable sample size, a couple months for these two players. Harry Hall is 1.3 shots better per round. In fact, the only category that Jason Day beats him in of the main categories would be shots gained off the tee. He is a little bit more accurate, but that's a 0.1 shot difference. Every other category, especially the most consequential, being approach, play, and putting, he beats him by a rather large margin. So I understand that he's a slight favorite, I guess, with that minus 120 versus the minus 105, but that kind of one-shot difference between the two players is like a minus 200 for a lot of these other options. For example, like a difference between Denny McCarthy, Brian Campbell is like a stroke and a half per round, and he's minus 230. So in my opinion, this minus 120 that they're hanging on a Harry Hall is just not enough, right? He should probably be at least minus 160, minus 170 in my opinion, which is why if I can get that same minus 120, maybe even a slightly better number on Hard Rock Bet, I'm going to be entering it all day. So that's one sportsbook bet that I'm going with for the next day. I'll be posting that on my Patreon page after I get my exposure on Hard Rock Bet a little bit later on. But that's the kind of thought process that I use for my 2-ball bets. I try and find guys that are just mispriced, whether that's slight favorites like we have here with the Harry Hall, a plus money player that I actually think should be the favorite in a matchup, or even like a heavy plus money guy, like a plus 150 to plus 200 on a player that I think is closer to 50-50 than the sports books are giving him credit for. That's normally the kind of bets that you'll see me going with. And on my Patreon page, I do post a lot of those on top of what we talk about here on the live streams. It's not really my main focus. I do more so focus on the pick'em side of things because, breaking down pin locations, weather, all of that is my specialty. That's where I find a lot of my edge when it comes to betting on golf and that sort of stuff. But there can be edges to be found with these 2-ball markets as well. So try to share my notes, or I try and share my process as much as I can when it comes to giving these bets and doing these previews, because it's not just about giving you guys fish for one night, right? One night's meal, as they say. I want to teach you guys how to fish and hunt yourselves. Go out there, find value, have your own process to doing your own bets. Because, I was somebody at first way back in the day, like 7 to 10 years ago, that was watching content, taking others people's picks and, sweating them out. I found it a lot more fun over the years as I created my own process and learned how to bet a lot of these sports for my own, doing it myself. There's a lot more satisfaction involved with finding value for yourself, and it end up coming through for, profit and all that kind of stuff, rather than, riding somebody else's coattails. And, I do like to give you guys some exposure to tail on these live streams. A lot of people, that's what they're looking for of this sort of content. But, maybe if you are that person, I would implore you to maybe start looking at this as a little bit more process based, because I personally find it a lot more fun and entertaining when I'm doing it myself. But I still think there's value in having these sort of resources to go through and help you get to that sort of point. Because I know when I first started this golf betting journey that I was nowhere near good enough, and I had nowhere near enough knowledge to be doing all of this without some sort of assistance. So that's what this channel is for. That's what these videos and these live streams are for. And that's even what my Patreon page is for. It's not just to go out there and tell every piece of exposure as I'm entering it, but also so that I can guide you along the journey, kind of hold your hand a little bit throughout this process to make you self-sufficient. In fact, I've mentioned this a few times, but there are multiple cappers that have their own paid discords and communities now that I've helped get to that point, that, started as relative newcomers into this kind of process and are now leading whole teams of their own to go out there and bet these sort of things. So, I take pride in that. That's something that has always been a part of my channel. That's kind of always been the idea, is to teach people how to fish and not just give them fish for one night. And hope you guys can try and embrace that as well. And like I said, I know there's some of you out there that are probably just here for the picks, maybe even hear this kind of rant and skip on by. I get it, right? There's always people that are going to be taking content and doing it that sort of way, but we are here for the sweaty tryhards and the people trying to learn it for themselves. Let's catch up on chat. Then we'll go through some of the exposure that I was considering so far. So let's see where we're at. So he said, did any of the prop platforms pay out? They did. The prop platforms do pay out when players finish, not when the entire slate is finalized. So that's kind of nice. He said, so of course it'll play easier so you can attack some of the 3 and 3.5s. We'll talk about it. I'm thinking some of the 3s make sense. And by the way, you do not have to spam questions in the chat. I will get to them eventually. So if you ask once, that'll be enough. I got you, Daniel. You said you have 100% profit boost on a 3-man on Underdog. You said thoughts on Rory under 8.5. Yep, we took that for round 1. Shane under 9.5, and then Scotty under 67.5. Well, I'm not really thrilled with any 3 of those, to be honest. Like, I'm not really going to give you that much pushback either, though. Like, Rory, he was even money round 1. Now he's heavily juiced under. Do I think he goes under 8.5 more likely than not? Yes, I do. But now you're getting a much worse payout. So, like, sure, I guess on that one. That's kind of like just a meh prop for me. The next one being Shane Lowry under 9.5 fairways. That one's also just kind of a meh prop for me as well. I'm actually not sure the odds on that one, but he's a very accurate driver. The average was about 8.5 today, so I have him at about a 9 projection. So sure, maybe slightly towards the under, but I'm assuming that he also has a multiplier on it. So that's also probably like a 5 out of 10. And again, I'm just being honest on these, right? I'm not a yes guy. That's not what you're going to get here on these live streams. You're going to get my blunt, full, honest opinion, right? When people ask my, comments and chat about props, this isn't a prop channel to go and be like, oh, do you like this? And the guy's just going to say yes, and then you fire it and then blame that guy afterwards. Like, I'm legitimately going to tell you what I think, right? So the other one would be Scotty under 67.5. I was looking at that one actually, but I would need a multiplier on it. I think on Underdog, it does have a multiplier if you're taking the underside. So assuming that you're getting a better than a 50-50 payout on that sort of thing, I'm okay with that Scotty Scheffler one. Now, I was talking to my guy, North Forker, about it, and he was asking about that at plus, I think 110 was the odds that he was looking at. And I said I would only play it if I know the course is going to play easier. And that's my stance on that as of right now. I think the course is going to play easier tomorrow, but I would only play that sort of number. I mean, shooting -3, that's a top 7 right now, right? There's not that many players that were able to go out there and accomplish that for round 1. I would only take that for Scotty if it's going to play even to under par. So I would probably stay away from that one, probably stay away from those other 2 as well, because I know the multipliers aren't great on those. Probably not what you wanted to hear, but that's the truth. So hopefully that helps you out there, Jack. The multiplier is going to help you out on that, though, right? It's 100% profit boost. So maybe you don't even care, right, about the payouts. So in that kind of case, like, yeah, I do think Rory probably goes under 8.5. He's one of the worst drivers in terms of accuracy in the field, and that was about the average. And I don't think the other 2 props, the only one that kind of sketchy, I guess, would be that Scotty Scheffler one, but it does help out with the payout, that's for sure. You got Ricky Stash has a chance of winning. Ricky's playing some good golf, though, that's for sure. He said, thanks for all the info. You're really the best to do it. I appreciate that, Gritty Gang. He said, nice reads yesterday, of course. Can you take Fowler under 70.5? Surely he can shoot par. You think so, but this is an elite level field, and the scoring average was over par today. So I don't think you should be saying like, oh, he can surely just shoot even par. It depends on the golf course you're at, right? If we're at Oakmont, shooting even par is an accomplishment. If we're at the 3M Open, then sure, right? You'd expect him to go out there and have an even par or better day. So I don't think it's like drastic value in this sort of field. He's an average to maybe slightly below average player. And you guys heard my conservative average for tomorrow is about 0.5 over par. So a player of Ricky Fowler's caliber, who I have as about a tour average player or a field average player at this kind of field, should probably be at probably about 70.5 strokes. So I personally don't see a lot of value on that one. I don't think it's crazy to take the under. Like, I would lean on the under because of the form. He's playing some of the best golf that he's played for quite some time, but I wouldn't say that that is drastic value. Why does it say that round one is still suspended when everyone is finished? Bud Colley still has to finish out on 18, so they're technically calling it suspended, but there's only one player that has to put out. He said, congratulations on the million of views, Luke. New to the channel, love the content. Yeah, I'm not sure that they, I wasn't sure if they told everyone about that, but yeah, you're right, man. I did get to 1 million views, so thank you on that. It was pretty cool. And I didn't know that they told the community as well. That's kind of nice. I wasn't going to celebrate it, but now that you mentioned it, I guess we will, right? Is it definitely not ranting, bro? You've learned a lot from me. Yeah, I wasn't talking to you at all, golf. Trust me. You're taking that the other way, man. I wasn't talking to you whatsoever. I was doing a rant on a completely different other thing, dude. You weren't even remotely in my mind. So don't worry about it, my guy. He said, sorry, you think you saw my edits. You misspelled it twice. Yeah, that's probably what it was. He said, will they need head-to-heads for us in Florida? They probably will, Mason. They're just a little bit slower than some of the other books to post those. Frankie says, appreciate my thoughts on learning how to fish. Your process is limited to feeding hot putters and taking guys at did good with tee to green. Yeah, that's the whole point of this, right? Is to teach you how to fish, be a little bit of a better. You said, how can you expand / improve on this? Just watch these live streams, man. We talk about various different edges every single live stream. There's not one simple answer to that, right? I mean, I have probably dozens and dozens of, I mean, not probably, I just don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I have dozens of different ways that I get to bets. So strap in, listen up, ask questions as they come up would be the best way to expand on that knowledge. But there's a lot to it, man. There's, like I said, just countless different ways that we find an edge on these. You cashed the Griffin head-to-head. That was good. Yep, that was one of the bets that we hit on today. It was about a +5 unit day overall, so you can't complain. What's going on, Sava? You're looking at Jason Day under 3.5 birdies. I'm not sure that I like the fades. We'll talk why in a second. I actually like positive stance plays. Thank you, Jose. Yep, congrats. Let's see. True Millie Maker, way to be, bud. Thank you, man. And he said you were looking for my Patreon and saw it. Yeah, I'm not sure if they announced it, but that's pretty sweet, my dude. And yeah, maybe Patreon, because I know it's linked to my YouTube, was saying that, but nice stuff, my man. But let's talk through this. So Sava, not to crap on what you were asking about, but if you're just joining us, you might want to go back and watch the first half of the live stream. We talked about how it's going to play easier tomorrow. So that's why I was giving you some pushback on that. But let's go through this board. So PrizePicks has more options. So we're going to start over there. They have a lot of guys at 3 birdies now. And I don't mean like everyone on the board is going to be value at this point. But in my opinion, of the players that they have at this 3 birdie mark, there are a couple that would make sense for an over. In fact, one of the ones that I was looking at before actually has already been ripped off the board. So unfortunate to see that somebody else must have also seen that value and nuked it before I could even get that exposure in myself. But it was Chris Gotterup. They had it at the 3 birdie mark. But if we take a look at the rest of the board, I think there are a few guys at that number that are also playable. Like, for example, Shane Lowry was kind of standing out to me. Like, and the reason for that, just to go back to the averages, average was 3.17 per round with harder conditions than what I'm expecting for tomorrow. So I think it's going to be at least 3.25, maybe even up to 3.5 birdies or better per round. So a player like Gotterup, this is the birdie or better list that I had up here. He's number 18 on tour at making birdies. That's why I was going to look at that as a potential over candidate. Now, somebody was ahead of me on that. So whoever that was, tip the cap to you. I was thinking the same way. And they must have put a good amount of money on that too, because PrizePicks respected their action and ripped it off the board. Something that they do for me all the time. But when you see that for somebody that's not a capper, that means that they probably put at least $500 to $1,000 on that bet. And PrizePicks will rip stuff off the board off of single actions at times. But I was looking also at some of these fairways. They seemed a little bit higher than maybe they should be. A lot of these are bumped up 0.5 from where they are in a lot of the sports books. And the average did go down quite significantly from where it was in 2021. 2021, it was about 9.25 per round. Today, it was about 8.4 per round. Could go up a little bit with the softer conditions. Maybe it's like 8.5 for round number 2. But they had a lot of guys at like 9 fairways, for example, that were average to maybe even slightly below average driving accuracy. So I actually want to do a little bit of research on these to see exactly where a few of these guys grade out. So let's start with Justin Rose first, too. He hit the ball really accurate off the tee today, so maybe he's not the best play for this. But as you can see, he's number 106 on tour in the category. In fact, let me bring up data golf. I like looking at the accuracy gained. That's something that you guys have probably seen on my channel quite a bit. And I know we had the guy asking about finding an edge on props. This is a perfect example of doing that. So when we have the average, and I'm going to make this as simple as possible because I want people to be able to reproduce this for other categories. This is the generalized strategy. You find the average for the field. So fairways was about 8.5 today. I think it might go up to maybe 8.5 flat tomorrow with it being a little bit softer. So then we know we have that in the back of our mind. We know the field on average is going to be about 8.5. We have to ask ourselves, is Justin Rose better or worse than that field average? Well, when we take a look at his numbers for the year, 106 is slightly worse than the PGA Tour average. So if the average is going to be about 8.5 per round, then that would put his projection, at least for the full season metrics. My apologies, guys. Still getting over that sickness that I had last week. Some remnants still getting through the system. But as I was saying, if you think he's slightly worse than that field average for the season, then his projection is probably below that 8.5 mark. Now, I wanted to bring up this driving accuracy gained because I like to look at their form heading into the event. He had 2 events where he was really struggling with that driving accuracy. Then he got into his groove over his last 3, gaining slightly to the field with all those top 20 finishes. But what I'm curious about is what he did today, because he looks rather streaky when it comes to the off the tee end. What you'll see for today is even though he hit, I thought, a lot of fairways, it was actually only 50% when it was all said and done. So he went 7 of his 14 in round 1, which has me thinking that this could be some value. And, the last double check that we can do is we can go to the sportsbook line odds and find that as well. So let's bring up Justin Rose. He is minus 165 towards the over. So the sports books, they think he's, favored to go over that 8.5 mark. But on Prize Picks, we're getting him at 9. So he has to go the whole way to 10 to go over that sort of number. And, if he ends up hitting 9 of his 14, so that would be missing 5 fairways, you'd end up pushing at that sort of number. In my opinion, this would be value towards the under, just based on everything that we've said right there. And there were a few other ones that were kind of standing out. So I guess let's do our line shopping and make sure that we're taking the best option that we'd have at 9, maybe even an 8.5 or an 8. That could be slightly better value. But I was considering a Robert McIntyre, but I believe he hits a few more fairways than what you have with Justin Rose. So let's double check Hideki Matsuyama as the next player that we'll go through on here. Hideki's number 117 in driving accuracy, so he rates out a little bit worse. And let's take a look at the sportsbook line odds. He's minus 150, so he's slightly less juice as well, which kind of coincides, right, with his ranking for the year. And let's look at his form heading in. And the category we're looking at, by the way, as you might be newer to looking at the sheet, is this very far right one. And what this is, sorry, I didn't mean to sort it by that. Let's refresh it so that we're back to just looking at the normal stats. This is his driving accuracy gain. So this is compared to the average that week. How many fairways did he actually end up hitting? And you can see he gained 12% a couple starts ago. He's also been hitting his fairways recently. So that would be the kind of counter argument against those two, but we are getting the push equity at that 9 number. So those are going to be at least 2 that I throw into the shopping cart. And looking at the rest of the board, I'm not sure there's that many other ones that look like blatant misprices. But for example, a Harry Hall, I'm kind of curious where he rates out for the season. He's number 107, so he's in that same kind of stratosphere, right? He's right around Justin Rose. He's right around a few of the other players like Hideki at 9, a few of these other guys at 9 that are potentially fadeable, but he's 0.5 lower, right? So we wouldn't fade the guy who's 0.5 lower in that same stratosphere. We're more so looking at these guys at 9 if you're trying to go in that direction. So they have a lot of guys at 3 bogeys on this board. I'm not sure if that was my favorite to really attack. I try to avoid these birdie or better matchups. They're hard to find an edge on, especially with that 0.5 that they've been attaching to it. But every once in a while, you can find an undervalue that can be worth mixing in. In fact, the only one that really stood out to me was maybe this Scotty versus Rory one, because Rory McIlroy in the under with the extra 0.5 was at least a little bit tempting. But the rest of this board seemed relatively decently priced, so it was something that I was kind of trying to stay away from. But going back to this birdie or better board, that Goddard up one was, God, I really wanted to take that. If I'm going to be frank with you guys, that one was really kind of standing out to me. But even some of these 3.5s, on like a Patrick Cantlay, a Victor Hovland at 3.5, I was considering taking for an over, because if I think the average goes up to 3.25, maybe even 3.5 birdies are better per round. Hovland, who's extremely aggressive and he's an above average birdie maker. I Cantlay the same thing. He's an above average birdie maker. And he won this the last time they played it in 2021. Those would be guys that would be value for that over at 3.5. And it could be a little bit riskier than the guys that we had at 3 because we don't have that push equity at essentially what was the field average. But we're also getting a player with more over equity because they're higher caliber players compared to those guys that we are getting at 3. So those are kind of my thoughts at this point. And I think there's even a few at 3.5 that makes sense. But yeah, kind of a bummer that they took a few of my favorites off the board. But I was also looking at the strokes board before as well, and they actually added more options since the last time that we saw it. And at 70.5, they had like Shane Lowry on here. And I'm curious whether he's at that same number still. So that's the shoot even par. And I know we had the question about Ricky before, like maybe even he's an option to consider at that 70.5 mark. That was the field average this afternoon, essentially, about that 70.5. And I think the pin locations look a little bit softer. Yet on top of that, the slightly softer conditions because of the rain that they got. And like 70.5, a player just to have an average day to cover could be a good spot on some of these guys. Like a Harry Hall, for example. I know we took him, for that 2-ball matchup. He's been gaining like a stroke to a stroke and a half per round to the field. In fact, if we go to the last 24 rounds, he's averaging 1.5 shots gained per round. To cover this kind of line, you're asking him to have a field average day. Like that's mighty fine tempting. In fact, that might even be a prop that we mix in here. But that same sort of thought process, right? Again, going back to try and find an edge on these kind of things, that's how you can do so, right? You can look at just raw shots gained. It doesn't even have to be as complicated as looking at ball striking poppers or trying to fade guys that did really good with the putter. That helps. That's kind of like the cherry on top when you're trying to find some of these things, but it doesn't have to be the main priority of your focus. And a few other ones I was looking at on here is like maybe even Rory at 69, like him to shoot -1 to push that, or maybe even shoot -2 to cover feels reasonable. He's the kind of player that'll gain about a stroke and a half to 2 strokes on average to this kind of field. And if I think the scoring average is going to be about 70 strokes, then that is, definitely value towards the under rather than the over at that 69 prop. Those are my thoughts on the slate right now. That's kind of giving you guys a whole lowdown of what I was looking at before we got on here. Underdog, by the way, has essentially the same exact board, except they're all at 0.5s and they have multipliers on them. So there's not really that much of a difference in selection. One thing I will note is I was looking at the birdie board because they have the most props posted for that on Underdog. And even before they posted the prize picks one, I was like, oh, like maybe I'll play a Victor Hovland over and mix it up with a Colin Morikawa over on birdies, who, by the way, Morikawa had a good shots gained ball striking today. Same thing with Hovland. They were, I believe, number 1 and 2 in shots gained ball striking in the field. In fact, just to confirm that, let's sort it in the category. You can see Hovland 1, Morikawa number 2, like I expected right there. So like maybe they would be good options for the over. But look at this scam payout they're getting. I mean, 2.58x on Underdog is just despicable if you ask me. If you took that on Prize Picks, I believe it's 2.75x. So that would be the better spot to do it. And I kind of pointed those guys out a little bit earlier. Like there's the Hovland prop. I believe they have Morikawa, at that same number than that even number. That could be what we end up taking as our exposure, is like something like that. So I'm trying to figure this out. Let's look at the odds. I guess we'll use that to find our favorites out of all of these. Let's see. Yeah, no Harry Hall odds posted. That's kind of expected. Let's see. So Hovland is -125 for the over. What is Morikawa? Morikawa is about even money at that number. I don't agree with that, like at all. And like Cantlay, how the hell do they have Cantlay is like better than those two? They got Cantlay at that -130. So like maybe Cantlay is the better player, at least compared to the sportsbook line odds. But I just think they're incorrect about that. Like Hovland is such an aggressive player that I think you should be at least that -130, if not slightly better odds. Who else was an option? Damn, yeah, that 3 on Goddard. I'm really hoping that maybe they repost that at some point, because that was definitely my favorite of the ones that we've seen so far. But I guess if I had to choose one of these, Harry Hall at 70.5 might even be my favorite. But I'm okay with all of them. They all seem like leans I'll probably mix in at some point here. But for the sake of the live stream, let's go with the Hideki fade on fairways, just because he was slightly lower ranking on the year, and he was also slightly better sportsbook line value compared to the Justin Rose one that we had. And now we've got to figure out which positive stance play that we want to mix in, which I'm tempted to go Hall or Colin Morikawa. Let's look at the yearly averages for birdies. That's another good data point that we can use to compare these ones. So let's go Morikawa first. Where's he at? He's number 22. It's going to be pretty tough to beat, to be honest. Hovland's number 23. Okay, so he's right there. And then Cantley's 21. I mean, he can't write a better script. They're back to back to back in birdie or better percentage. And I mean, I'm talking like 0.05 difference, 0.07% difference between the three players. So that's not going to help us out. They're pretty much all the exact same in the category. I guess shots gained metrics might be the best way to go about it. So we know Hovland and Morikawa were absolutely striping it. But Cantlay also has the course history, right? And I know they renovated the course and it's playing a little bit differently this time around, but that's hard to parse out. So the shots gained metrics on Cantlay, though, he gained off the tee, slightly lost in approach. Oh, that's not great. And then he lost in the short game categories. I'm tempted to go Hovland because Hovland made 6 birdies without gaining with the putter. Let's look at the tee time on them. That could be a good way to use this as a kind of separator. Hall goes off super early in the morning. So that could be pretty advantageous, especially after the kind of rain that they got. I think it's going to dry up a little bit as the day starts to go on. So, and then the other two, let's see, Morikawa's at 10:43. So that's kind of in the morning. And then what's Hovland's at 12:38. So he's got the latest tee time of the three. I'm still going to end up entering all these. That's the silly part, but I'm just trying to pick my favorite for the live stream because you guys know I try and grind it out, try and give you guys the best value as humanly possible on these live streams. I'm going to open it up to chat. I'm going to go through a few questions in the meantime. I'm going to let you guys maybe throw your opinion on chat. Let me know what you guys would take if it were up to you guys. Would you go the Harry Hall under on strokes, the over on Morikawa birdies, or the over on Victor Hovland birdies? And again, there's a good chance that I end up entering all three of those at some point this evening. But let me know your favorite as we go through a few questions so that I can decide for this live stream. But let's see where we left off. So you said your golf round 1 was a birdie fest. Round 2 board is live. Yeah, I was looking at that, Matt, actually. There are a few props that I was even considering adding. So let's actually just do that now. So we're not going to spend like as much time on that as maybe what we did with PGA. But I do want to mention that. So it wasn't quite a birdie fest. I'm not sure if I would go that far, right? Because it did play over par. It played about 0.3 over par. Their birdie or better average, though, was about 3.6 per round. But what we've got to consider is that's a DP World Tour field. So when we go to this birdie or better board, and I think that's probably the most value as of right now would be on this aspect of it. But they have guys like Valimaki at 4. And I was also kind of looking at Matt Wallace at 4, maybe even a Thorbjørn Olesen at this 4 birdie mark, because these are elite tier DP World Tour guys. Like I know that they're not that special on the PGA Tour, but these sort of players when they play overseas are like top 10, maybe top 20 players in every single field that they're playing in. So for them to be 0.3 to 0.4 over that field average is a mistake because it's not the field average of like a PGA Tour event. It is much, much, much lower level. So in fact, like Rafa Cabrera Bello, like he's probably about a field average player. So him being at like 3.5 makes sense. Guys like Wallace, Olesen, Valimaki in the morning, that's kind of the one I was mainly looking at because he's got the morning tee time when it's not going to be as windy for round number 2. Might want to look at that. And, you know, maybe that's what we use as like a third prop, because if we go over under, then add in another one, it'd be a 6x payout. That could be something to consider on the price pick side as well. And something else to note is that they do have a live golf board up, but they do not have any strokes or birdie lines. So kind of unfortunate that we don't have that board to completely go through. But I'm assuming after they get the stat averages from round number 1, that we'll get that for rounds 2 and 3. So we'll be able to do the live golf stuff tomorrow night, be able to give you guys a little bit more insight over there. I watch all the live golf. I stay rather on top of it compared to a lot of the other people who seem to be rather disinterested by it. Maybe it's because I'm younger. I enjoy the EDM music that they play. It's kind of my type of stuff. And I love golf as well. So I'm all for that sort of thing. Also, a lot of my favorite players went over there, like Brooks, Bryson, John Rahm, some of my top players before they left for live. So I still try and track them over there. I'll definitely be hawking those boards for rounds 2 and 3 if we get strokes and birdies. So I just wanted to mention that for live. Not really any value that I saw for these birdie or better matchups. And besides, birdie or better matchups aren't really my sort of thing. Like I said before, like the matchups, I'll go through them. I'll try and find value where I can on the sports books, like we did here at this Harry Hall prop. But the bigger value, in my opinion, at least with what I'm good at, people are better at different things. So, lean into what you have the most success with. That is always the best idea. But I find the most success with taking down these course conditions, right? Figuring out whether it's going to play easier or harder, finding value in any one of these specific categories. So that's what I focus on just a little bit more. So that's the Eurogolf side, also the Live Golf stuff. But yeah, not the biggest sport. Kind of going back to these, because I know I asked you guys which one's your favorite, and I still do want your answer. I think we're going to take Harry Hall out of the picture. It's either going to be Colin or Victor Hovland that we go with, because we already took Harry Hall for this matchup. So I'm not sure if I would have doubled down on him. That's another thing that I do. It's just kind of personal preference, but I will give you guys my reasoning behind it. Is I try not to double dip on props where if one guy has a bad performance, it stinks up my whole day, because sure, it could go the other way. If he hits, then you're absolutely, ecstatic because you're going to hit on a lot of different things, but there's a lot of risk involved with that sort of thing. So we'll probably go without Harry Hall on that sort of one, and it'll be one of those two players. Morikawa at 10.5 on Underdog, and that seems way too high. You don't mind the multiplier because you have a payout booster at 10.5. You mean for fairways, right? So yeah, he's juiced way towards the under on books, so that's why the multiplier's in that direction. Is it way too high, though, is the question, because he's an elite tier driver of the golf ball, and the average was about 8.5 per round. So I would probably put him closer to like a 9.5, maybe a 10 projection. So yeah, I would say he would be valued towards the under at that number. But the unfortunate part is with that specific prop, and that payout booster is going to help you out with this, is that, he's favored in that direction for a reason, I would say. So yeah, I'd probably put him at about 10 though for projection. So I think that's reasonable to take. What about Ryan Fox for the under and fairway? So yeah, he's at 8 on Prize Picks, I believe. I mean, with the 8.5 average, I think that sounds right about right. So I don't think that there's drastic value in either direction on that one. You said Underdog dropped more stuff. Good call, man. Let's go ahead and refresh that as we get through a few of these other questions. Watching the process in action is cool. Yeah, that's what I like to do on these live streams, kind of show you the thought process live. He said Lucas Glover was a joke today putting. Let's look at him. That's not a surprise though, huh? Right? Because Glover kind of putts like a blind man, putts like Stevie Wonder. I'm trying to read those greens. But even his around the green sucked. He lost 1.25 shots there, 2.5 on the greens. Pretty tough stuff. But believe it or not, man, he wasn't the worst. The worst was Keegan Bradley, and then even Brian Harman in second there. Nearly 5 shots lost for Keegan, and then nearly 3 for Brian Harman. Tough scene for those guys. I feel like I could do better than that. Keegan Bradley 2-ball versus McNeely. He said Keegan was superb in every other metric apart from the putting. I could see the bounce back on that one. The only thing I'll say, Sava, is that I'm a slut for Babak McNeely this week. I think that he fits this golf course to a T. In fact, so much so that I bet him outright, just like I did for McIntyre, who was in first place. McIntyre is making me look like a genius. Not so much with Mav so far. So I like the shots gained kind of angle that you're going with on that one. In fact, I'm not going to give you too much pushback because of that. It checks that box, and that is a lot of times what we use for those matchups. But the only thing I'll say, and I would just be remiss not to say it at this point, is I love myself some Mav this week, man. He's playing some good golf, and he fits this golf course extremely well. Yeah, Lucas Glover's he's a head case on those greens, and his wife isn't too nice to him either. Let's say that much. FanDuel has the stroke lines on odds. They usually are close with Draftkings. Yeah, they're normally about the same. They're usually off by like 5 or 10 points at times, though. He said, this guy said the soy boy won't get it. Soy boy, by the way, is a funny ass barb I've heard given to people before. That's some pretty funny stuff. All right, you guys haven't told me anything with this Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland stuff. I guess I might have to figure it out for myself, huh? I would say I kind of lean towards this Morikawa one because he tees off earlier, because I truly am 50-50 on which one I think I like a little bit more. The shots gained metrics are a little bit better for Victor. He did make more birdies today, but that doesn't always mean it's going to happen the same day the next time around, right? Golf's extremely variant. It's a sport where there's a lot of chaos, a lot of what's the word for it? Volatility is the word I was really looking for there. So let's go with this Morikawa. So we're going to go the Hideki Matsuyama under. We're going to go with the Colin Morikawa over on birdies. I think Hideki Matsuyama should probably be at about 8.5 fairways. There could be an argument to be made that he should be at even 8 on Prize Picks, considering the kind of averages that he's had for the year. And then with this Morikawa prop here, I think that 3.5 is, it's reasonable, at least when it comes to the projection. But I think the field average is going to be in the 3.25 to 3.5 range. And Morikawa is a well above average birdie player in this sort of field. So I think it's reasonable to take his over on books. He's not like sportsbook line value, as you guys can see before. I think he was like minus 115 towards the over. So pretty much exactly even money. but I think it's going to play a little bit easier than what they're giving it credit for. So that's going to be the pick'em slip that we end up taking. I did want to take a look at maybe some of the props they added over here on Underdog. My guess is, and I'm 99% sure that this is going to be the case, is that they just copy and pasted prize picks, right? Whatever prize picks ended up going with for the board, they just ended up matching it. And based on what I'm seeing so far, it looks like that's the case. So yeah, not really any value, I guess, that's opening up if that's going to be the case. But now if you're somebody that can only enter stuff on Underdog or only enter stuff on prize picks, you're at least going to have both sites to work with. And we can use that to our advantage as well. That is something that we can use the line shop and figure out which site gives us the best payout for the specific combination that we're trying to enter. So shout out to Rushing Yard in chat for letting us know about this. But, as I'm going through this, it does look like they just copy and pasted the board, which is disappointing, but not surprising. That has been Underdog's MO for the last year, even 2 years. Kind of annoying, that's for sure. You like Hovland over birdies. I just realized there were more comments below, by the way. So you're looking at Hovland. Okay, that's a bet towards the other side. I was kind of hoping you'd say Morikawa, but he did play better today, though. It's only one round, but that does matter, right? He said for positive stance plays, you're focusing on the ones that played the least after the rain delay. Okay, I guess that's a narrative you can go with. I don't really get it, so maybe you can add on top of that, but it's a narrative you're going with, I guess. You're going with the Hovland over on birdies. Okay, that's 2 votes in that direction. That's going to be hard to ignore at this point. You said you like them all. TBH, your personal favorite is Ricky and Hall. Then Hovland, your third. That's, I guess, a third vote for Hovland, right? What's my handicap? I'm about a 7 handicap, so I'm not great at golf, but I'm not terrible. I play golf with all plus handicaps, though, so I feel like I'm better than most 7 handicaps out there because I gamble against people that take my money if I don't play better than that. So I get a lot of strokes, but I still have to play my ass off to keep up with those guys. Mix it in with the over on birdies for Hoagie and Underdog. It's 0.5 more on prize picks. Let me see. And I wasn't exactly sure what you were saying, but I think I got the gist there. So he's at 2.5, and then what does he get? 3 on prize picks. Yeah, see, the difference is that multiplier, though, right? Like he might be 0.5 higher, but here's the problem. He does have that 0.82x multiplier. Let's look at the strokes. Maybe the strokes is what we were talking about. Yeah, it doesn't look like it there. Yeah, those payout multipliers, man, are nasty. Those 0.8x's make a really big difference. Maverick is slightly below average on driving accuracy and is at 8.5. He hit 5 today. Yeah, so it's the same thing with these guys like Hideki and then that Justin Rose one you're looking at. They're the same exact sort of players in accuracy, but they're 0.5 higher. So that's why I'd go with one of those two instead. That push equity is really nice to have. And yeah, I got you, bro. I know you were talking about the under there. Xander for the under 69.5 has got to play some good golf at some point. I'm with you on that one, Jack. He is going to play some good golf at some point. 69.5, let's talk about that projection. If the average is going to be about 70.5, again, that's my conservative projection, probably closer to 70. If you put a gun to my head and said, what's the actual average? I'd probably say 70. So let's go with the 70.5, though, just to be conservative about it. You guys know me, right? I try and be as harsh on these as I can possibly be. He averages probably a stroke gain to the field in this kind of field at worst. So that would be at 69.5. And if we're saying at worst at 69.5, then it would probably be value towards the under. Now, I'm kind of curious. I'm pretty sure he's juiced towards the over on books, though, right? So let me just double check on that. I think he was one of the few guys that had a line posted. Let's see. So no, he didn't have a line posted. I was thinking about Cam Young at 69.5. They had juice towards the over. Xander's better than Cam Young. And I know Cam Young's won recently, so put some respect on his name, I suppose. But Xander, if he was maybe minus 145 towards the over on Cam Young, Xander's probably at worst about even money. So yeah, I could get behind that one, man. The thing to note is that he got better as the day went on as well. So his first 4 holes were horrendous. I think he was like, +3 through his first 6 holes or something. He had a lot of other people on the golf course that were like -2, -3 at that point. But the rest of his round outside of 18 was pretty solid, especially the like middle 12 holes, or I guess like the last 12 of his last 13 holes were some of the best golf of anyone in the field. So I'm okay with that one. I don't think it's like drastic value just because I think 69.5 is probably about where I'd put it, but I would lean on the under. He's going to figure it out at some point. Connors for the under on 10 fairways. I'd rather go with the 10.5, but I'm not sure if the 10 makes sense. Yeah, you said Soy Boy, you first heard it from Big D-Gen. Yeah, man, I've heard it from a few people over my life on video games, especially. People love using that. That's like their favorite slur online is calling people soy boys. But I think some people look at that as a derogatory word. So we'll try not to say that one too much. Even though if you take that derogatively, then that's on you, right? It's not like most bad words that people use, right? That's like you can choose whether to be soft or not, right? He said, appreciate the feedback and work as always. Of course, of course. Do we have any opinion on JT tomorrow? Played like shit today. I'm assuming you're talking about the real JT, right? JT Poston. No, I'm kidding. I know you're talking about Justin Thomas. So yeah, he played like crap today. That's a good way to put it. I'm glad he did because I did end up fading him. But he's such a loose cannon. He's such an unpredictable player that I'm using him in DFS because I think he could bounce back in a heartbeat. Now, the reason why I'm using him in DFS, which is a more volatile format, is, if he sucks, then oh well, right? Because I'm playing in DFS. I'm playing in a contest against 20,000 people. I'm not expecting to win first place, right, with my entry. Like I fully understand ahead of time that it's a fringe outcome. I'm trying to win first or last when I'm entering in those large field GPPs. We've seen JT have horrible first rounds like this and then course records in round 2 this year. In fact, it's happened twice already in 2025. I like them in volatile formats. So like if there's a market where you can take like best score in round 2 or fantasy DFS, like I'm talking about with myself, that's where you play Justin Thomas. I'm not sure I would trust him on like a 50-50 prop, but there are certain markets where I think that makes sense. Same Burns for the over at 3.5 birdies. Yeah, he's one of those elite tier birdie makers. So let's go back to that list. What is he like? Let's just control F it to make our life a little bit easier. He's number 24 on tour. Look at that. Cantlay, Morikawa, Hovland, Burns. Back to back to back to back in the birdie better percentage. And look at this, by the way. Cam Young's number 25. Why is Cam Young minus 150 towards the over? And there's other guys that are like even money. Like he's not as good as them. Like I don't understand it. And let's look at Sam Burns. I'm actually kind of curious on that one. So yeah, he's minus 120 towards the over. I can get behind that. Let's look at the shots gained metrics, right? I guess that's the last little test that we should put him through. He was super putting dependent. So no, never mind. I still think he's probably valued towards the over, right? If we're using like the full season sample size, but 3.5 shots gained putting, and that's how he made pretty much all of his hay today. That is going to be really tough to do in back-to-back days. Holland Fowler under strokes is intriguing. Yeah, I'm with you on that one too. I think shooting even par is going to be a lot easier tomorrow than what it was for today. In fact, that could be about the scoring average. So I'm not going to give you that much pushback on that. Can't lay to bounce back tomorrow. I think that that's a reasonable take. He won here in 2021, so that's not the craziest thing. He said, here's why. If Scheffler played mostly after the rain delay, his score would have gotten better. Therefore, his props for tomorrow most likely would have been lower or not offered. So here's the pushback on that, Daniel. These prop sites don't overreact that much after just a one-round sample size. They will slightly adjust for them because of how somebody played in round number 1, but that's probably taking it a little bit too far. I do kind of agree with what you're saying, though, and I do see what you're hinting at. It's just that the sports books don't adjust it as much as you probably think, I would say. But I do think that some of those players are probably getting a little bit too much credit, right? Like McIntyre made like 6 birdies straight to end his round. It was obviously easier to play on that portion of the day. So like, for example, the shots gained metrics for the guys that were finishing late, it was easier for them to gain strokes to the field, but they don't make enough adjustments on the sports books after today to warrant like making that a narrative. But I do kind of like that. I think like if they over adjust too much on a player, that'd be a good narrative to use as a fade. And he said Rose to shoot -1 doesn't sound that bad. He had 2 water penalties today. And yeah, I think he can actually shoot even par and cover that line, right? Wasn't he at 70.5? Maybe he was at 70 and that's why you're saying that. Let's see. So yeah, he's at 70. My bad. Yeah, I'd say the 70.5's like I kind of lean on a little bit more. Let's see what he is over here. So he's actually 69.5 on Underdog. That's kind of surprising. That seems a little aggressive to have him down at that number, but he is juiced towards the over. So I guess I understand what they're doing there. The only thing I would say about that is it feels like there's a few other guys at 70.5 that are the same tier of player. I would slightly prefer to go that direction. Like, for example, the Shane Lowry, the Harry Hall they were talking about before, but I'm not completely against that. He said rookie for the more than 3 birdies. I was considering it, and he actually might be a pretty good one. Let's look at his birdie percentage. I haven't looked at his birdie or better percentage in God knows how long. So let's see. He's number 63. So in this kind of field, that's average. That's like mid. in the top 50 kind of field like we have this week. I'm okay with it though because of the push equity, right? We got to remember he's not at 3.5 like some of these other elite tier players that we're looking at. He's at 3. If he gets to that number, ends up being a tie rather than a loss. Yeah, that or even the 70.5 on him. He was also one of the guys that they had with that extra 0.5. Could take him for a positive stance to play that way as well. And man, Ricky Fowler, I mean, just to show you guys how he's been playing, is he back? Like, is Ricky Fowler back to being a half respectable player on tour? Kind of seems like it. I mean, look at all this green on this right category. And this is shots gained total, right? This is what we actually care about. Didn't have a good Rocket Mortgage, whatever. Didn't have a good PGA Championship, like whatever. He showed up at other major championships like T14 at the Open Championship. I think that's definitely an option for round 2, guys. But I'm getting tired over here. You guys can't tell my voice is weakening out a little bit as well. But we're going to go ahead and cut off the live stream here. Best of luck, guys, with everything that you guys are going with for round number 2. For every single slip that I take and all my exposure for Friday, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. That will include every single prize pick slip that I take. Also, everything on Underdog that I'm entering, and any of the sportsbook plays that I add on top of that as well. So all of that posted for my Patreon members. For that, you want to join the prop tier over there. So the prop tier is where I post all the pick'em stuff, not only all my exposure as I enter it, but also all the reasoning behind it as well to make you guys a better and more educated bettor of golf, but also stat averages, weather reports, literally everything you need to be a successful and profitable bettor. And round 1 ended up going really well for us. Again, 7-1 on our props. And on top of that, the 2-ball matchup, and I guess it was 8-1 for the day. Let's try and make it a full sweep for tomorrow. I'm not counting on it, but it would be a heck of a nice thing to do to go out there and really pad that bankroll. Let's see what we can do. And best of luck, guys, with everything for Friday.